Unmute. Okay, I think we are live. Can we get the PowerPoint up there? Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for attending tonight. I hope you appreciate that we managed to schedule this without a Leafs game on. All good?
Yeah, this is muted.
Want no volume on yours. Sorry, a little technical.
Yeah, it's muted on the Teams here. All right, try that.
Okay. I think we are good. Can I hear you online? Just want to confirm. Yes, I'm gonna. Good. Every room is different. Someone's typing. Oh, okay, yes. We are good. Thank you very much for your patience. My name is Paul Croft. I am a senior project manager and the project manager for the study. I'm probably a new face to you if you were here at the last meeting. We've had some transitions, but I am the project manager for the study now. Connor Lehrbauer is the city project manager. I will ask you to introduce your team, Connor.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. So as Paul noted, I'm the staff lead for this project. I'm a senior manager, or senior planner at the City of Oshawa in Planning Services. I'm joined by Laura Brown, who's the principal planner in Planning Services. Ranjit Gill, who is a manager of infrastructure or development infrastructure, technical section. Yeah, and we'll get that eventually. Tom Goody, who is the director of Planning Services, and that's it for my side.
Okay, I'll take it back. So to my right here, we have Yanis Stoyas, who's I guess the project director and my boss on this project. So I'll try to be on my best behavior tonight. We have Cooper Howison, who's my project coordinator and jack of all trades and mastering the technology on the fly. And then finally, we have Kieran Chiba, who is from O2 Planning and Design, who is a joint venture with us on this project. And Kieran is here to talk about land use and urban design. I'm more the transportation guy, and again, the overall project manager. I believe we have Councillor Lee in the room. Councillor, I don't know if you want to make your hello. Hello, thank you. So I'm going to sit down because I'm going to be doing a lot of talking, and then hopefully not too much talking, and then you all have an opportunity to talk to us and answer questions. We do have a bit of a lengthy agenda tonight, so I'm sure you have a lot of questions and comments. We're going to start by talking about sort of where we've been, stuff that you've probably seen before. We'll go over that ground again, get into some of the new work that's been done since that time, and then finally at the end, have an open question and answer period. Before I begin, we do have some administrative points to cover. In the interest of time and in fairness to all attendees, especially those that are not in the room tonight, I would ask that we hold our questions and comments to the end of the presentation. I know there's probably a little bit of frustration and uncertainties that have built up over the course of the study. We are going to do our best to answer your questions and concerns either tonight or by following up with you individually after the meeting. That is our commitment to you. If you do wish to ask a question during the question and answer period, please just raise your hand and we'll try to go around the room in a fair manner. We'll try to alternate between people that are in the room, people that are listening to us online. If you are attending virtually, so please just raise your hand on Teams and wait to be selected. Again, it may take a while to get to you, but we will get hopefully to everybody tonight. If for some reason you're dialing in on the phone, I have some bad news that we cannot accommodate you in the question and answer tonight, but please submit your questions online at Connect Oshawa or follow up directly with Connor on his phone number, which is listed on the website. We would also ask virtual attendees to keep your camera off and your mic muted, and then you can unmute yourself once you're called upon during the question and answer period. And finally, the best way to submit formal written comments or private questions and comments on the study, if you have something that you don't want to ask in public, again, use the feedback form on connectoshawa.ca. Again, we're going to start a bit of a study overview again. We've talked about before, the proposed GO train is really the main driver for this study. The province and the region require the city of Oshawa to undertake this study in order to identify lands with the potential for redevelopment to support rapid transit, probably to help pay for the rapid transit station, and to help solve some of the crises and issues that we have in the city and across the region today with respect to transportation, housing, and the environment. I want to point out that as part of this study, there are no specific developments proposed or permitted. Those go through their own process. They have to follow the city's official plan. They may need a rezoning. They have to adhere to the zoning bylaw. There will be specific studies that each development will have to come along and do for traffic and servicing, garbage, parking, all that stuff. What this study does is it sets a vision and a framework to guide that expected development, both in terms of its location and its form, and it tells those developers what city and communities' expectations are in terms of what you want to see from the development. So be it community uses, active transportation infrastructure, more parking, less parking, trees, parks, all that good stuff. Growth, and I think we've said this before, and I know it came out at the last meeting sort of more through the Q&A period. I'm going to get it out there now. The growth is going to occur over decades. There is only so much development that can happen at once. I think the absorption rate for Oshawa is something like 300 high-density units per year. So yes, we have thousands of units proposed, 300 units a year. We are talking a very long horizon. And if you think back to what Oshawa looked like 50 years ago, I was 1 year old. The GO train, it didn't even come to Oshawa. It ended at Pickering, right? The glass plant that's a vacant lot now had hundreds of people. Now it's a vacant lot. The Nob Hill Farms used to be a factory, and it was a supermarket, and now it's been vacant for 20 years. Even the beer store on Ritson Road closed and is a microbrewery now. So change happens slowly, sometimes in big chunks, and other times just gradually, and life kind of goes on. The city and region, we are required to update the official plan every 5 years. So as development occurs in this area, city as well as the region, who's not here tonight, they do their own thing, hopefully in coordination with the city most of the time. Those plans are also updated. So over the course of the build out, plans continually update and they adjust to what's happening in your community. Really, so the outcome of this study is twofold. We have a master land use and urban design plan that Kieran's going to walk you through in a few slides. Then we have an area specific transportation master plan. And so that's kind of looking at the development traffic that's expected and assigning it to the road network and seeing where improvements are needed. And actually not just for cars, but also for active transportation and transit. We're satisfying, it's a process. So it's a paper process the province has to undertake a class environmental assessment. So we need to follow that process. And at the end of all this, actually that EA goes on public file and there's a 30-day public review period and you have an opportunity to speak above the city and speak to the province about what you like and don't like about this plan. Bit of a study timeline. This is where we are, spring of 2024. We're in stage 3, so there's been 2 stages before this. We have one more public information center planned after this, where we will be finalizing the results of the study, hopefully with your input that we get tonight. And then, as I mentioned, there's a 30-day public review of the environmental assessment master plan report. And then eventually things move forward, infrastructure gets built, development happens. The purpose of why we're here tonight. So we're here to talk to you about the land use intensification review and urban design guidelines. We actually have our specialists here tonight, so hopefully that will address, I think, some of the concerns that were absent last time. We're going to talk a little bit about First Avenue and Monocton Avenue, which is the roadway that's initially identified for modifications as part of this plan. Talk about what the options are and how we're going to evaluate that. And also talk about the study timeline, the key dates. We're here to provide an update of the study and the planning process that's been undertaken today, and we're here to listen to your feedback. I got my fireproof underwear on tonight. I don't know about you, so, but I hope we're all going to be nice and respectful and have a good conversation. Like we said, we understand you look at the map, there's a lot of uncertainty because there's a lot of red and purple splotches, and we're here to kind of walk you through that process. So the feedback we heard last time, there were really 4 main themes. We heard a lot about safety, so both for pedestrians and cyclists, but also just general safety and security within the area. We know there are ongoing issues and challenges not directly addressed by this plan, but they are all valid concerns and things that the city has to take into account moving forward. Land use and density, that's a big one. We've talked about what development might look like and where it may be located. Transportation, how we're going to move all those people around when we bring all this development to the area. And then those community enhancements that I talked about, the economic and development potential of the study area, and all the good things that go along with that, with green space and parks and people-oriented community spaces. As part of the EA process, one of the things we need to do is develop what's called a problem and opportunity statement. So that's part of the process. That is where we synthesize what the main problem in the study area is with your input. So we talk about how we have a lot of parcels of land that are undeveloped and underutilized in the study area, and that the transportation network is disconnected for users of all forms of transportation, especially pedestrians and cyclists. Along with the problems, we have opportunities that we can seek to address. So again, there's going to be a GO rail station opening up at some point. Those of you that live in proximity to it will have the benefit of being able to walk to the station, maybe go downtown, take in a Jays game, have a few pops, come home, not have to worry about driving at all. We acknowledge that with that you're not the only people that are going to want to use that GO train station. There's going to be a lot of people across the city that I want to get there. They still have the opportunities. This is one of, I think, 4 or 5 GO stations that will be built along the extension. Because this one is in a very urban area, the focus, I think, will be on getting people here by transit, cycling, and walking, rather than, as happens today at Durham College, Oshawa GO, where you got the giant parking lot out front. We also developed some vision and guiding principles, and we hope that this kind of reflects, it's very high level wording, but I think hopefully reflects a lot of the desires of the community for a sustainable and context sensitive built form, an accessible multimodal transportation network, and really improving the lives of those that live, work, and play in the area. We want to promote a reduction in auto dependency because we know when you have new development, there's going to be traffic. So finding ways to manage that demand, whether it's through parking, encouraging active transportation modes and forms that are encourage people to choose modes other than the car. Maybe they have a parking space, they use their car on the weekend to go to Costco, but during the week, they're able to walk to the GO station and go downtown to work. I'm going to turn it over to Kieran right now, and it's great timing because I need to take a drink of water. So Kieran, you're going to read off yours and have Connor go?
Yeah. So thank you, Paul, and everyone else for the introduction. So my name is Kieran, and I'm with O2 Planning and Design. I'm going to provide you with a summary of our land use intensification review. And just in case you're wondering, it is online, the draft, it is. And so we encourage everyone to please take a look. Because for the interest of time, we're going to get into a bit of a summary of the components of it. As part of that, really, it's important to say that we're going to highlight some of the findings of the alternatives that were discussed at PIC 2, how we went about the process of evaluating them and land preferred, but then also reflecting a little bit on what the land use plan actually entails, understanding that there's a level of detail that we are providing subsequent to that land use plan being identified, and that's to introduce a preliminary urban design guidelines set, which is really a tool that we hope is going to help inform city staff and the development community on best practices in urban design. And I want to stress too that this is a foray for the city into looking into urban design in this particular part of the city, which is obviously as developed as Paul has alluded to. It's not a greenfield. It is an existing part of the city, and it has sensitivities to it. And so we look at that urban design guideline set to be rather a live document and one that can be updated as time goes on. The other component that we won't spend too long on, but I invite you to take a look at the draft, is that a series of recommendations to help facilitate implementation. So this, again, is to say that this is an early step in understanding the full potential of this area. And for it to become a holistic community, there are several other measures that will come subsequent to this study. Things like protection and integration of built heritage components, civil and municipal infrastructure assessment, which is part of this ongoing study and will be revised as things develop further. Parkland assessment and open space public realm strategy. And to have a good grasp of what community amenities and facilities are required for this emerging community. Okay, great. Next. Oh, you're on it. I'm sorry. So as described, PIC2, we began to look at options, starting with the existing conditions, which also included currently proposed development sites. And it's really important to reflect on this, because what we began to understand is that there is inertia for development in this area, really homing in on larger properties to start. But as you can see from the vignette up top, is that you have a lot of piecemeal sort of development happening. And this creates sort of a couple of problems. It creates inefficiencies in delivering services and inefficiencies in delivering infrastructure upgrades as they're required when we see an intensifying part of the city. It also does not, it creates a juxtaposition really when you see towers popping up without sort of coordination. And so you could have large towers right next to low density housing, which is something that we wanted to sort of address through the options development and say that this is the prime time to think about a vision, as Paul has alluded to, that coordinates the planning efforts with infrastructure improvements and improved capacity that obviously take advantage of the critical investment being made to public infrastructure, particularly that of the GO station, but also recognizing that Durham has identified Simcoe as a rapid transit corridor. So with that, Sorry, next slide. Oh. System.
It's more for the people. in-
Oh, okay. So as part of this process, we were really asked to go through a process of evaluation, right? So that we have all these options. So how are we actually judging them? Is it like, it's not a back of a napkin type of exercise. It's really actually has a bit of rigor to it. And as part of the scope as identified by the city, we worked with the city to help identify the actual evaluation criteria, which is on the left of the slide. It may be a little bit difficult to read, so I'm going to just summarize them for you. But really is the start of the benchmark of the province's request to see a density target around the GO area, which is about 170 hectares. I just wanted to remind you that it's actually a very, very large study area. So its absorption is not all one solution. It's not all high-rise towers, right? This is about understanding what the target is and building sensitivity towards it. But it's also important to note that there is proximity issues that we took into account when doing the evaluation, and that includes items like proximity to the actual station itself, proximity to the downtown, because we understand that there is efforts underway concurrently to see the downtown revitalized and for it to become a very important node and growth center in the city. And so how does this play into that? And how does it support it is really, really important. And also understanding that this plan should help to reinforce less dependence on vehicular movement. And as Paul's alluded to, we're not trying to get everybody out of their cars, but it's also about having strategic reductions in how much we depend on the vehicle, providing infrastructure and through compact development to actually allow for other modes of transportation to inform your day to day. And it may not work for everybody, but it can work for a larger swath of the population and help to reduce congestion and all these wonderful things, which the province is really encouraging us to have. The other item that's really important is to help facilitate open space targets that the municipality really has. And it's important to note that the current existing condition is actually deficient in public open space, which you may not know, in comparison to especially the service levels that you may expect in other parts of the city, particularly to the north. And so then it's strange, but through development, we actually open a door and possibilities to actually increase the amount of open space through good design and planning. It's also really important to understand that with all this development is to think about flexibility in the typologies that we're going to introduce. What we see today is really a single model of single family housing that has pre-existed for a long time. Of course, we have infill happening right now with varying units, but the study area itself currently is really made up of lion's share of one type of housing. And so then what this plan can encourage is flexibility to encourage different types of units that cater to a wider range of demographics, which also will allow for people who are from Oshawa, who want to live in Oshawa, but felt like maybe they're getting priced out or could not continue to live here. And this is very common throughout the GTA, that there is a place for you to go, whether you need to downsize or whether you live alone now or whether you're starting a family. That there's unit types that and build form options available that didn't exist before. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the preferred land use option, which was termed bridging to downtown, was selected. And this was a result of a long process, I'd say, since PIC 1, which was in the summer of last year. So since then, we've received a lot of feedback, some positive, some negative. But it's also important to note that these plans have been vetted by the city, stakeholders, who have all provided input to the selection of option 3. And as a summary of option 3, it really looks to increase density. And what I'm showing here is 425, which sounds like a scary number, but it is a maximum. We're looking at ceiling, and it's really referring to the overall threshold of this area to absorb density. That isn't to say that we will hold to a target of 425 people and jobs per hectare, which roughly equates to 4 acres, 3 to 4 acres. It's really to say that the absorption of this entire 170 hectare site has the potential of reaching that target. The reality is through market driven forces and through public input, which we're starting through this project, that number will come down, and it will be an Oshawa number, which is what is really important. This might be something that works in Mississauga, doesn't have to work here, and that's what we want to stress. So that's why your input is really, really important today. The other thing, and I just to reinforce what Paul said, that this is a longer term plan. So it is looking outwards to about 50 years. Obviously, some sites are more prime to go now or in the next 10 years. And what we're trying to anticipate and try to tell the public to anticipate is for change progressively over time, just so you know. I'm sorry if my voice is cracking because I've been told to speak up. I hope you can hear me. We can jump to the next slide. And the next slide, it just goes to further reinforce what's been stated in the previous, but that starts to get into a level of detail with regard to the land use intensification review itself. It's really about understanding that there are defining preliminary land uses that will start to, well, let me take a step back. The city already has land use designations, right? And what we're looking to do is to take those land use designations and provide further clarity as to how they would adapt and evolve to this particular site as it relates to intensification and as it relates to mixed use. So mixed use is a term commonly used in planning that refers to sites not being relegated to a particular one specific use, but if you have intensified unit types, things like a building that has apartments that the ground floor can have commercial, that's a mixed use residential focused building. So the area itself is really about defining what the variations and varying aspects of mixed use can look like. And again, this draft report goes into further detail about what can happen and where and how. Part of that is also about understanding that the plan is looking to create this type of intensification. We want to create a residential mixed use focus here as opposed to a commercial mixed use focus or an employment mixed use focus, which is more prominent in other parts of the city. And the reason why we want to do that is because we know that the downtown is really meant to be the civic and commercial heart of the city, and we're not looking to challenge it. So we want residential focus in this area to support the cultural activities that are occurring within the downtown, except for possibly the exception of Simcoe, looking to be more of a gateway between the 401, this community, and the downtown. So looking at that corridor, which is looking to intensify anyways due to rapid transit. So, slide. With all those colors on the map, I think that it can get a bit daunting. I think what we really wanted to go and reinforce is that it's not all high-rise development. It really gives the option of looking at different forms of development that can occur and coexist within the same block. So And this allows for people who want to stay in their homes and not change the flexibility within the block to continue to offer coexistence of the existing condition within a rapidly developing community. Next slide, please. And to do that, oh, yeah. And to do that, what we, and this is new, granted, from what you may have seen from PIC 2, are a series of urban design guidelines. So these guidelines, as we spoke to before, are looking to address issues of block configuration and intensification models that would happen within the existing block structure. Again, this is within an existing part of the city. So we know that these blocks are already serviced by municipal infrastructure. There's no reason to rip it all out. It's more about upgrading it to meet current capacity, but to work within the existing block structure was something that you wouldn't do in the north of the city. But then also understanding that within the existing block structure, how it is that built form will adapt. Again, we're not looking at towers to resolve all density issues. There are lots of different ways that we can address density within the site. And understanding that this whole site is actually made up of a series of different block sizes. And so at this early level, what we've identified is 3 essential block typologies that we can work to as a sort of a typical condition. And they're based on size and what you might find in them. The next slide, please. So we'll start very quickly at introducing the 1 acre block, which is pretty prominent in some parts along in correlation to Simcoe and Center and a little bit further east. We really do see the smaller block typology to be a very interesting one, and it facilitates opportunities for infill housing within the existing residential fabric. It's a really great way to also look at how do we preserve some of the landmarks within the area, because there's a more sensitive type of development that can occur in conjunction with preserving of landmarks. And so we thought it was very important to introduce guidelines which address this particular unique type. What's also interesting is that you have a lot of blocks that are within 0.4 to 1.4 hectares. And this is a result of the sort of the typical back-to-back single-family homes that are serviced through streets, municipal streets all around. And it's a very interesting condition, which is very prominent within this area. And what the diagram here starts to suggest is how it is that the varying types of buildings can be used to address sort of contextual sensitivity. So you might, at arterial road connections, look to see towers, but that is a potential density solution to meeting the needs of a particular development site. But when we filter down and get closer to local streets, that there's a potential to see a more sensitive form of development happen. And it's one of the other aspects the guidelines try to highlight. And lastly, we have the larger sites, right? So we do have accumulation of larger sites within the study area. And again, these are typically prone in other constituencies as a place of very large towers, an opportunity for development to really go gangbusters. And I think that best practices have really shown us that that isn't the way to go. And I don't necessarily think that it's the way that Oshawa would like to see this area develop. So there's ways to integrate sensitivity to that. Again, looking at arterial roads where we have those sort of interfaces or frontages, and looking at various forms of density to occur there, understanding that the podium is one level, but you might have setbacks and other architectural tools that can be used to help soften the impact of high-rise development. If a site so chooses to go that way. And to understand that there's an opportunity to tier down as we get into more stable neighborhoods. The other issue that we wanted to sorely highlight, particularly in this option or in this configuration, is the fact that we need more porosity. We don't want to have super blocks. So the guidelines actually go to reinforce better public realm. And to do that, we also look at the larger sites as giving an opportunity to provide public open space, even if it's on private land, which is a very common practice within the GTA today. And it's something that is a way for development to give back, particularly in this area that we know that there's a deficiency in open space. And so this is one of several measures that can help to mitigate that.
Back to me.
And I believe
All right.
so.
Okay, so we are about halfway through. I'm gonna not skip over things, but I'll hit the highlights. A lot of this material, you probably noticed, is on the boards outside. So I'm gonna talk about the transportation assessment that's been done. I will note that the assessment that's been done to date, particularly focused on First McNaughton, does not look at full build out of the development. We're looking at about 10 to 20 years out, which is when that portion of the area is expected to develop. It also aligns with the city and region's transportation master plan. Once you start getting beyond 20 years out, there's a lot of unknowns. There are improvements to the transportation network that nobody's dreamt about yet, changes in travel patterns. I'm holding out that I'm going to get that jetpack one day. Nobody? That was a good one. Going back to process a bit, we talk about how we evaluate our preferred land use alternative. Really comes down to inputs on the left. So the preferred land use alternative that Kieran talked about, the problem and opportunity statement that I mentioned, review of all the planned transportation infrastructure improvements within and beyond the study area. So whether it's the MTO, Metrolinx, Durham region, City of Oshawa, that all goes into the hopper. And then outputs in terms of the potential solutions we can explore, how we evaluate them, and then develop a preferred transportation solution. In terms of alternatives, we basically had 7 rough alternatives. Again, they're mainly focused on the First McNaughton corridor because, as I think has been mentioned in the past, roads like Simcoe Street and Ritson Road are the region's responsibility. Metrolinx does the GO station, all that stuff. So option 1 is our baseline. That's a do nothing. That's really in there because the provincial EA process requires us to use that as a baseline against all the other alternatives. For First McNaughton itself, we really have 2 alternatives. We can keep it as a 2-lane road, widen it to 4-lane roads between Ritson and Simcoe. We can maintain that roadway as 2 lanes and add active transportation improvements, so nicer sidewalks and cycle tracks or cycle lanes. Along with that, there are some operational improvements that we can make. You may have noticed on the roll plans that are out there and that I'll reference in a bit. So what some of those changes might look like. Talk a bit about Albert Street. It's really in there more as a sensitivity assessment. We know the bridge has been there. The bridge has been closed for a while now. We can either choose to rebuild it or we can choose to not rebuild it. And then finally, there are some other localized active transportation improvements that can be made in the area. I had a good conversation at the beginning about, how do we connect First McNaughton and bike lanes that basically just begin and end at one end and the other. Where can people go and how can we connect them to the broader network? We evaluate these alternatives based on 5 main broad areas. So we talk about traffic operations and safety, the natural environment such as it is. That really comes down to street trees that are in the corridor, the socioeconomic environment. So things like property requirements and air quality and noise, the economic impact and cost of actually building the road itself or the different alternatives that we have. And then there's the official policy, always having respect for what the city's plans say should be done. A lot of dots, a lot of colors. Did a fulsome evaluation of the 5 alternatives, and each dot kind of represents one of those criteria in each area that I mentioned. At the end of the day, the recommended options are to maintain First McNaughton as a 2-lane roadway and add active transportation improvements. So keeping it 2 lanes, not widening to 4 lanes. We're going to suggest some operational intersection improvements. So new turn lanes, potentially prohibiting some turns on and off of the street to help keep traffic flowing and reduce conflicts between cyclists and cars. And then finally, rebuild Albert Street. The decision there was basically to not make a decision. It's deferred in the short term. In the long term, as development occurs in the area, it's still there, the corridor is still there. A lot of this comes down to the fact that there are complications involved in the design of the GO station and the rail corridor. How high does the bridge need to be to accommodate electrification? How close is the station to Albert Street? All that stuff. So the door is not closed, but just in the short term, we're deferring that. So speaking of First Avenue, McNaughton Avenue corridor itself, the evaluation, as I mentioned, we're suggesting or proposing to maintain it as a 2-lane roadway with active transportation improvements in the corridor and some localized other improvements. Another issue that we had to address was to consider how wide does the right-of-way need to be? So not just pavement, which is where the cars go, and then the bike lanes and the sidewalks, but from property line to property line, how wide does that need to be? And our initial recommendation was a 26-meter right-of-way. That is consistent with a City of Oshawa collector roadway, which is what this corridor is. However, there has been some discussion and further consideration will be given to a 30-meter wide right-of-way just to sort of protect for that longer-term planning horizon. And then in order to achieve that 26 or potentially 30-meter ultimate right-of-way, we need to consider how the roadway gets widened. The first thing we did was break the corridor up into 3 segments. And these are fairly logical. I think you'll understand just based on what's out there today. So between Simcoe and Front, there's the Dollarama Mall on the south side. There's a short block with some houses on it. You get into segment 2, and now we have basically the old glass plant and the Nob Hill Farms terminal on the north side. And then segment 3, again, we get into residential side with houses actually directly fronting onto the street with driveways and parking and lawns and that. I think you all probably know what First Avenue McNaughton looks like today. So the right-of-way that I talked about where we're looking at either a 26 or a 30-meter right-of-way, out there today, it's 20 meters or less. So, we're talking about a 3 to 5 meter widening potentially on either side or on one side. There's a lot of stuff happening in the roadway corridor. We have those mature street trees in some areas, which I think would be an important community consideration. So here you can see just in each segment, here we're, between Simcoe and Front Streets. Here we're looking along through the glass plant. And then finally, in the east segment, there with those single family houses along the corridor. Then the design options. So again, I'll refer you to the roll plans that are out there on the table if you haven't had a chance to review them. I'm not going to go through them on the screen because I can't see them. You're not going to be able to see them. We do establish some design criteria. So it's intended to create an efficient and safe multimodal transportation network. Kind of taking the vision and breaking it down into the specifics of this roadway corridor. Point out the last point, which is very important, the final street design, all road infrastructure has to adhere to provincial and municipal standards. So it's going to be a safe street and it's going to be designed to be universally accessible and meet the requirements of the accessibility for Ontarians with disabilities. We also have design criteria that are given to us from the city. So they have a catalog for what does a collector road look like in terms of how wide should the traffic lanes be, how wide should turning lanes be, and if there was on-street parking, which there was not in this case proposed. Same thing with sidewalks and cycling facilities. So all that goes into our design options for the corridor. And we have three options. So option 1 is a fairly conventional design where the cycling facilities are located on road We would provide a wider buffer, so we wouldn't just have that single painted line. There would actually be a meter wide buffer that would give a little bit more space. There are probably opportunities to do things like flexible bollards or maybe even pin curbs in there to help provide a little bit more separation between the cars and cyclists. But this is a very traditional approach. Option 2 is a more contemporary approach for cycling facilities, and I'm not aware of any street that's like this east of Toronto. I've worked on a lot of projects with this type of design in Ottawa and other cities. It's very more European design where the cycling facilities are moved off the roadway. They're raised to the level of the sidewalk, and there's both a horizontal and vertical separation between cyclists and the roadway. So it increases the safety and reduces conflicts between cyclists and cars and sort of benefits everybody. And then finally, we have an alternative where we put the cyclists all on one side of the roadway. This saves a bit of space. It's kind of one of the main benefits. It also provides better opportunities for access for sites on the south side. So we have that large development on the glass plant that's proposed. So they would have access to be able to go left or right, east and west, get over to the Michael Starr Trail, go north to the GO station, to downtown Oshawa and beyond. This alternative gives us a little bit more space for landscaping because by combining the cycling facilities together, you save a little bit of space. There is a much greater potential for conflicts between cyclists and drivers at intersections where if you're driving one way and you have a cyclist riding in parallel to you, you need to be careful you're turning across them. So at signalized intersections, you may have to operate separate phases for each mode of traffic. But generally on a low speed collector roadway, it's less of a concern. We talk about, after developing the cross sections I mentioned before, we look at how the right of way can be accommodated in the corridor. I think I mentioned. So we have 3 alternatives here as well. We can widen all to the north, we can widen all to the south, or we can kind of split the difference and go in between. And there's different options, different impacts with each of these. And we have the ability to mix and match within reason along the corridor. And you can see in the next slide, that's exactly what we're going to do, or what we're proposing to do. Sorry, I should correct myself there. In the 2 west segments, so basically from Simcoe to Howard Street, the proposed solution is to widen all to the south. We think that's the better solution because that is where we have development properties. So the glass plant, the Dollarama Mall, which at some point will probably be redeveloped. And the city has a better opportunity to acquire property through redevelopment as opposed to having to negotiate and acquire property with a bunch of individual property. And then finally, in the east section, the solution is to minimize the amount of property required on each side and do an equal widening off the center line. I'm going to point out that the result of this study, and I had a very good conversation with a gentleman before the meeting who has the house right at the corner of McNaughton and Howard. So the result of this study is merely the identification of a preferred ultimate right-of-way and design alternative for the roadway. It does not result in any direct change to your property or affect your rights as a property owner to enjoy your property or sell it to another owner. Just by putting a line on a map, the city does not say, that's ours now. It's yours. The city can acquire it through redevelopment. That's the preferred approach because the city gets it for free. The other approaches kind of in, say, decreasing level of preference. The city, we're establishing a footprint for the roadway, and you can see that we have very generous things like landscaping. The city has the ability, when you get into detailed design of the roadway, they can skinny things up, reduce the amount or avoid property required. We have, the ability we have a wider road in the west end where we're able to get property a little easier. We have a skinnier road in the other end. The city also has the ability to defer parts of the project, so it may be more critical to have the west side of the roadway where the development is, and maybe the side where we have a lot of single-family houses gets done later when redevelopment occurs, if it ever does. The second option is, if property is still required, is to negotiate and have ideally an amicable negotiation with a property owner, where at some point we buy your front lawn or half of your front lawn. And then finally, the big E, expropriation. That is not a preferred option for the city. It's a very messy and long process, and the only people who really win are lawyers. The city, I don't want to speak out of turn for the city, but going in and expropriating like 20, 30 properties is time consuming and very expensive. It probably costs more than the road would to actually build it. But expropriation is a last resort, and it is more of a possibility if in the fullness of time there's redevelopment in the corridor and there's one or two properties that are left and they don't want to sell, the city has the option to expropriate those properties. But that is a long way down the road. And again, the city would ideally prefer to be getting the property as things redevelop. I'm going to talk a little bit about the evaluation criteria. So I mentioned we have 3 alternatives. We do not have a final preferred option at this point. This is a key point for your input in terms of what you want the road to look and feel like. So our 4 main areas, we talk about user safety, mobility and accessibility, placemaking and community, and then green streets. These are the draft evaluation criteria. So these will be finalized after this meeting. And then we'll go away and do our evaluation and come back to you with a preferred alternative. We do have some ongoing technical studies in the area. Some of these were deferred or because we can't go out in the winter to do natural environment surveys. So those are starting soon. Some other technical studies that we have to do just to look at things like archaeological potential, the built heritage and cultural landscapes. Do we know have some heritage buildings in the corridor? Contamination, so we have some old industrial sites along the corridor, so we want to know what might be in the soil underneath the roadway, because if the city digs it up, that soil may have to be trucked away or moved somewhere else. And then finally, geotechnical, which is really just goes to how the engineers need to design the pavement based on the type of traffic and the volume of traffic that's expected. We're almost done. Study timeline. So I talked about this before. I'm just going to recap again. I think we're about 2/3 of the way through the study. It's our 3rd open house. We actually have 1 more open house, if you can believe it, probably in the summer or fall of this year. And that's where, we present to you the final study recommendations. Goes to council again for their approval. So your elected officials still have to weigh in on this plan ultimately. And as I mentioned, we are following, at least for the transportation part, we are following an environmental assessment process. That is a provincial process, so that has to be filed for a 30-day public review, and you have an opportunity again to tell us your thoughts. So I will thank you, and I'll leave you with some contact information. So we have Connor's and Ranjit's email, and then myself and Yanis. And we have a handy dandy QR code if you have the technology that will lead you, I guess, I don't know if it takes you right to an email or just to the takes you to Connect Oshawa. So, okay. It's also on the board at the back. So I think at this time, I'm just going to take a little drink of water. Oh, we have, okay, somebody. Yeah.
In a room this size with this number of people, we need a proper microphone system. Like this doesn't work in my opinion. I've been to a number of committee meetings in this room. We have an excellent microphone system in this room. I know a couple people got up and left. Any hearing disability at all, we're not hearing. And It's not a criticism on the presenters. You're very mild speakers. I used to have people yelling at me.
I'm trying, I'm trying, I thought I was
Projecting.
projecting, so.
Going back here is very difficult. And the last thing I have, I only have one. When I first started to get involved here, I had no idea what a hectare was. Zero. And I don't know how many other people in this room know what a definition of a hectare is. I had to go online and actually figure it out in 2.74 acres per hectare. And when you look at this property, we're talking 419 acres approximately for this development. So, I don't know, like I'm fairly old, so I always deal in acres and yards and inches and feet and that's so. I just.
Okay, thank you very much. We want to, let's take an online, is it Ruby?
Yeah, so we do have a hand up on.
Okay, you're going to handle the online, Connor?
Yeah, I don't think you can.
Oh, right, okay.
So- Okay, so I'm just going to allow. Yeah.
Hi there, this is Rubai. Can you hear me? Hello?
If you can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear
Ask your
you. Can you
question?
hear me?
Ruba yet?
Yes, can you hear me?
Should be on.
Can you hear me?
Audio coming out.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, so I can. You mute.
Try that.
Hello, Rubia, can you hear us now?
Oh, I just said something. Oh,
You
that's
can
it.
hear, can you hear us? Sorry, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh,
Is
perfect.
it a little louder?
Yes, perfect. Yeah, Rubai here. Just a quick question. Thanks for the presentation. Very informative. And I've been following along for past 1.5 years, I would say. And I bought property in Oshawa back in 2021. I moved to Oshawa with the anticipation that the Go expansion will go on because now we have been asked to kind of go to downtown on a regular basis, right? For work. I work downtown. I work from home. Sometimes I have to go in person. So I appreciate the fact that you kind of shared the timeline, stage 5, sometime end of this year or early next year. What's next? Like, when do we think we will be able to kind of enjoy the GO train and we will be able to kind of, go to work from the Richardson GO station?
Sure. So it's Connor here from the city. So yeah, so kind of the gist of your question was kind of when is a lot of this all realized in terms of the community, in terms of the transit?
The GO station.
The GO station specifically for sure. So, obviously, we're here as the city. It was mentioned earlier, the region has a role to play here as well in terms of regional transit. And then obviously we have Metrolinx being the actual provider of the GO line and of the GO stations in this area. Metrolinx has not given us specific date in terms of like an opening date, so to speak, but we do continue to work with them very consistently and very frequently in terms of advancing the project, and they are kind of full speed ahead, so to speak. They haven't given a date, so I'm not going to give a date per se, but it definitely does continue to progress, and we're looking at obviously a number of years. There's not shovels in the ground, but once shovels do get in the ground, you would look at maybe 3 to 4 years. So again, I'm not going to provide a date, but hopefully, we're in the same boat. We also hope there's something that occurs very soon.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for clarifying. Just wanted to, like, even in the next presentation, at least if we can have some milestone, we don't need the date. At least if we can understand, like, there are 4 more stations needs to work or happen, 3 more, like I would say, milestone we need to cross before we can even get the work start, and then the work takes like this many years, so that we can plan as well as a homeowner and our work and everything. Thanks for the opportunity. Great presentation. Thank you again.
No, thank you. And to your point, certainly, we were last year for a PIC, I believe in June of last year, and we've certainly, on the city side, progressed in our conversation with Metrolinx. that time. So certainly the file has been moving since the last public meeting, and I would certainly expect the next public meeting, we would be at a advanced stage as well. And, you know, like you said, at that point, hopefully maybe an opening date. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you again.
Sort of towards the back, yes, you, sir.
Yes, you've been talking about the above ground, but you're gonna have to change, I assume you'll have to change the water lines for the larger population density, you have to change sewer lines. What would be you'd have to do that before the buildings go up, and if so, what the timeline?
So as I mentioned, sort of off the top, the study is really looking, it's a vision and a framework for land use and transportation, and that each development, as it comes along, they're going to have to assess what the water, sewer, and drainage. Drainage is also actually an important consideration in this area, as we're finding out. So they will, those studies will have to be identified, like sort of identify what the needs are for water and sewer. We're sort of not there yet, but our input in terms of the number of units and timelines will sort of help feed into those answers. But yes, you're absolutely right. The existing infrastructure is likely not capable of supporting the ultimate development. And even if there wasn't development proposed, I would expect, given the age of the area, that a lot of infrastructure is probably going to be planned for
5 years ago.
Okay.
That's why I'm sorry to see if it has to get ripped up again, with bigger stuff in.
Do we have anybody online?
I don't think so.
No? Well, look at that. Sorry, ma'am, did you have your, yes?
I'm wondering why, or perhaps maybe in the next meeting, if there'll be someone from Metrolinx that would be here as well. The only reason is because since this has all happened, I've been receiving things like in my mailbox. And to the extent where they wanted to do a land survey and move big equipment into my yard, and if they did any damage, that they would be responsible for it. Obviously, all of the neighbors on that street declined it, but they went so far as to like find my name and contact my lawyer. Yeah, so, and then when I tried to reach out to them, obviously I didn't get anywhere. So I know that's not like your normal protocol, but I really didn't appreciate the fact that they kept putting things in my mailbox and went to that extent that my lawyer had to get involved. So I'm just wondering if next time, or if there's someone I need to talk to that would talk to me about that, because that was, and it never got done, by the way. No one agreed, and there were no surveys.
No surveys
for
done.
nature,
Yeah.
being done in the backyard. So I'm just wondering, even if they did it a different way, that's all.
We can ask, but
Yeah.
Metrolinx has no obligation to attend these meetings. They have and in theory, they have their own process to consult with the community about their infrastructure. Sir?
To that note, it'd be good to see the region here as well. Or have a meeting with the region as well.
Yeah, so Paul, if I may, so Metrolinx, the region, and quite a few other, obviously, local stakeholders and, you know, different levels of government are sent notices and are invited to these meetings. Obviously, they're welcome to attend. You know, this is a city-led process. This is kind of meant to be kind of reciprocal to our official plan, to our local roadways. You know, there's a lot
Of
of.
it as a government,
Mhm.
big G, you know,
Yeah.
rather than the constituents having to make 3 and 4 and 5 different meetings to 3 and 4 and 5 different people or different levels of government.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot easier for us, like parents coming from out of town to have a meeting where they're all there. One other thing quickly, can we change the Dean Avenue, McNaughton and First one bloody name?
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, and that's why I started saying First McNaughton as opposed to First Avenue McNaughton.
I know, right?
I think we have somebody online, and then you had your hand up at one point, but let's jump online. So John Armstrong.
Hello, it's Mike now. John, if you want to unmute yourself. Okay, yeah, you should be able to speak.
Still showing as muted.
Yeah.
Sorry, John, if you just want to unmute yourself.
I actually can't do it online. Oh, he's got a.
All right, there we
Okay.
go. Sorry about that.
There we
I
go.
just had to find,
Sorry,
just
there you
had
go.
to,
Yep, we can hear
had
you.
to find the button. I don't use Teams for this kind of thing very often. Thanks for the opportunity. You certainly have, you've got some pretty significant density that you're going to be proposing over the next number of years, which makes a lot of sense. That does create sort of some challenges as it relates to your urban design and creating things that are at kind of people scale, particularly on the high density side of things. Are you planning on being a little more a little more descriptive in the way that you use your urban design requirements to ensure that the buildings are built to kind of people scale, using quality building materials, architectural designs, that kind of stuff, just to make sure that the vision that you've got is actually going to be realized. Because sometimes these things go up and they don't really have that same kind of connection to the ground and to people scale.
Sure. Yeah. So thank you for the question. I think that's a very good observation. I think that when we are studying a site at 170 hectares, and the comment's been raised today as well that that's a huge swath of land, and as a vision, there's only a certain level of detail that we can really transpose and showcase. But so the leap forward in the initial urban design guidelines began to highlight a lot of what we were talking about. There's several precedents as well, best practices that are being used largely throughout the GTA, a few international that are relevant to this within the report, the draft report as well, which can highlight sort of what we're thinking about. Could happen at that granular level, but it is very true that what we're looking to do is to not cascade a large color block and say that this is going to be all high density and no one have an idea of what that would actually render. So this is our first foray into really helping to define it. I hope the urban design, the graphics that have been identified in the urban design summary help to give a little bit of confidence that we're not looking to build Tower City here, and that there's going to be some sensitivities employed. But it will also read through the text within the document and the precedents provided. And as I mentioned, we're hoping that it's a living document that helps to evolve over time. So by all means, when you come to other public meetings, I mean, we encourage you to share your thoughts if there's really great solutions to public realm, for example, and architectural details. But that is definitely the next level of detail that would be expected starting from the study and beyond.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Yeah, because I did note that you've got some language in your current pieces. It was just very soft language right at this point. So
for sure. And yeah, for the interest of being concise for this presentation, like we didn't dive into it, but by all means, yeah, there's more detail.
Thanks very much.
Gentleman at the front and then towards the back.
So just with regards to the preferred land use plan, can you speak to, was land assembly considered in determining where the densities were? And if so, what was the thought behind that?
So as a practice moving forward, land assembly is an assumed way forward, like that we would see, particularly in an area like this that is derived of several single family units and a parcelization as we see here, which is pretty detailed, right? And it's over time, it's happened. As we see intensification happening throughout the next few decades, is that the expectation is that there would be land assembly to create some of those larger blocks that could sustain higher density forms of housing.
Was land was consideration given to the larger parcels of land within the study area to have higher densities because it's easier to redevelop?
That's actually already happening. So what we've seen is those are the sites that developers have homed in on. And so then they're in play. Some of them have already some applications in before the city to consider, because as you can imagine, that's like sort of the easiest way forward, right? So developers have already homed in on that, and there's density requests for increased density in those pockets.
So would you say preference then for higher density would be on larger parcels of land within the study area?
Well, not necessarily. So what we're hoping that the land use plan does is provide, instead of piecemeal large sites that are not connected or are not actually directly connected to the GO station or are not connected to a more sensible way of increasing infrastructure capacity, that there's a plan. The plan then will provide for an opportunity to coordinate planning and infrastructural improvements at the same time to make sure that we don't have sort of a pocket of high density in one location that's surrounded by single family units, and then another pocket 5-minute walk away, and there's no correlation with that of like the GO station or rapid transit on Simcoe.
Okay, I just challenge you to reevaluate your plan to consider larger parcels of land, because as you mentioned, it is easier to develop on larger parcels of land than accumulating multiple single family lots.
Sure. I mean, that's and again, like the land use plan is suggestive of like where the density can go, right? So we've documented a pattern of that happening currently, but it's not to say that certain land uses or properties are more susceptible to that and could be prone to an application being brought forward to the city, at which point they would be able to consider like rezoning to a higher density, notwithstanding that couldn't happen.
Gentlemen, yes, you, sir.
Hi, this is point out there's no actual image of that rail station or Metrolinx, because I've been down forever and public. I'm looking in terms of the ownership of the property. I just moved here 5 years ago from Toronto, so I know that Knob Hills is where Metrolinx is, and they own the property, I guess. And that the land below First Street, is that owned by the province as well, or is Metrolinx on that property, or is it the city that's in charge of what gets developed? That's a great question. Last guy. What gets developed there?
Yes, so the Knob Farms property is owned by Metrolinx. That is everything south of the CP rail corridor, up into a certain kind of point. It's not the whole block, but it's most of the block. There's a little bit of that block that is privately owned. It's the same ownership as the glass plant that was referenced. And that is subject to a large development application. So it's, I don't know if,
Let me pull them out.
yeah, maybe if you want to pull up maybe the land use plan.
Yeah, so back in the day on the south side of First Avenue was the Pittsburgh PPG glass plant. It changed. I think it finally shut down in 2008. And the building actually only got torn down not too long ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's privately held. And then kind of north of First Avenue, you can almost kind of see the crosshatched area there.
There was a parking lot for it, wasn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So that is also privately held. And again, there's a development application there for several thousand units, I believe, for an official plan and rezoning amendment.
Can you name who owns it?
I don't know. It might be a numbered company. I'm not sure the exact name, but
And the people that bought the property, the people that are developing housing down below. I remember well in Toronto, there's Article 31, wherever you get development, you have to donate something in terms of park. Or
yes. So you can actually see there on the land use plan, the southeast corner, that is the area of parkland that's been proposed for that application. So we did actually show it on the map.
Okay.
The application hasn't been approved yet.
That's not there already.
No, that would represent the parkland that they're currently showing on their application. But that application is not approved yet. So that's kind of potentially subject to change.
And that has to get approved through the city?
Yes, that would be an official plan and rezoning amendment, I believe, which would be subject to approval from city council.
Park contribution area, is that the same sort of thing? Have the stars there?
So the stars are kind of meant to show potential parkland contribution areas. We kind of wanted to give an idea of, you can see they're actually usually on the larger parcels, because as was mentioned earlier, it's much easier to get kind of parkland from a large development application, because that's kind of what the Planning Act dictates, is an allotment of land may be provided to the city, or the city has the option to take money and use that money to buy parkland elsewhere. So we're starting to look at kind of potential areas for parkland. But as you can see, I mean, it's stars on a map. It's not property boundaries or borders or areas or anything like that. I'd like to think we're going to get there through the next stage, but this was kind of our first foray into kind of looking at what potential areas on this land use plan might accommodate more parkland. As Paul noted, the area is deficient in parkland. Specifically, I believe neighborhood level parkland. There's quite a bit of community level parkland along the Oshawa Creek Valley, but in terms of neighborhood and kind of the smaller subset of parks, it's as Paul noted, kind of deficient compared to the average across the city.
If it's deficient, I'm kind of wondering why they would take away part of Cowan Park there to make it utility lanes.
Yes, so that was actually noted in, I think, someone I spoke to outside. So that actually is the existing property boundary of Cowan Park.
Oh, it is.
Funnily enough, I think, if you look at it, I think maybe CP has some of the areas naturalized. So maybe it's kind of being used as an expansion of the parkland, but that is actually representative of CP's ownership in that area. It's not to say there's a parkland star there. It's not to say that it couldn't be looked at in the future, but that is kind of the existing park boundary.
Is the existing Ritson Bridge going to be sufficient for the second line?
So that is still up for debate. That is going to be up to Metrolinx. It's going to be up to CP, and it's going to be up to the region, who is as Ritson's a regional road. That's going to be up to them. We don't have clarity on that on the city's end at this point.
Yeah, they're currently in the design process of figuring out how much and how wide and all that.
Which is, I suspect, why the wooden bridge is closed down.
They needed to, because it was very substandard. And yeah, it was the first.
Been designed to be substandard.
It's very old for sure.
So gentleman here has been waiting.
You guys know where your focus initiative is going to be, where you're going to start?
No, Kieran, do you want to?
Are you going to start
Kind of, well, again, sorry, Connor.
No, yeah, I think in terms of the city's perspective, our focus is going to be, after this study is done, work on the policy side and the engineering side of the corridor of First Avenue, McNaughton, and Dean. So we are trying to work towards the future of providing the services. But in terms of development, that will be industry-led.
Does Heritage Homes come into accountability there too?
Yes, absolutely. The existing built heritage policies of probably the province and the city and the region.
Even if they haven't been recognized by the city?
Well, they would have to be designated, listed. I know the province is getting a little bit out of my wheelhouse as a transportation guy, but the province has recently kind of changed the rules a bit on heritage designation, and cities were kind of rushing to designate a whole bunch of properties. Kieran, I don't know if you know,
Yeah.
Kieran, you're more the land use guy.
Yeah, just building on that too, like I think that it requires further assessment. Like, so there is a heritage call it classification, like obviously apply to certain properties, but there are also cultural heritage amenities that may not be recognized. And so then moving ahead, I think that it's critical that we actually have an actual built heritage strategy or cultural heritage strategy that identifies those properties going forward. And I mean, it's also important to note that there's some amazing specimens of churches and places of worship and other school sites and things like that. They are under private ownership as well in many cases. And so then, those landowners have to assess what they feel the need for. So the Ritson School site, for example, is a development site that's being brought forward by the region. We're friends with the consultant who's helping the region right now on it. And, you know, they see tremendous heritage value in it. So we're hoping that they can incorporate some of that into the design of a new residential development. But it is, some of these aspects are at the landowner. So, yeah, but I think that the build form strategy will help. Yeah, which.
I think this gentleman there had his hand up first, and then I'll go to you.
I'm real concerned with the Ritson Road Bridge, so I know you can't give me the answers right now. Any rough ideas as when they would finally make a decision on that? It really, it's going to impact my building.
In terms of the design, so designs are already underway. So if are you talking about more like impacts to your property? I'm sure that if they needed property for that purpose, they would have already been in contact with you.
Can I see the plans for that at City Hall anyway?
It's not available publicly because they have not made them available publicly. They do circulate us in terms of our input into their design, so that, you know, what they build is according to our liking or standards, and it's the same with the region as well.
I'm not concerned with them trying to take my property. I'm concerned with what it does to my property if they have to raise that bridge up.
I think Metric should have been already in contact with you in terms of getting.
We can't find Mr. Lakes. I don't even know if they exist.
I personally cannot share those documents. What I could probably do is maybe put you in contact with the project manager of the design, so they could probably give you more information. Yeah. Great. Maybe if you need to go to Connor or myself, our contacts are on this. Let us know. Thank you.
Sir?
Thank you very much. A question about access to Highway 401. Does the increased density in the area trigger any improvement to the interchanges at Simcoe and Dixon?
So there is a project right now ongoing by the MTO that ultimately will alter the ramp configuration. So the on and off ramps from Drew will close, and the westbound off ramp will move to Simcoe Street. So they'll enlarge that, and it'll tie in to the intersection of First and Simcoe. I believe the Ritson, the eastbound ramps, I think Simcoe is closing and they're consolidating at Ritson. I think it's a little more challenging, but again, as an MTO project, from a transportation perspective, we need to know what the modifications are to feed into our analysis. But again, it's an MTO project, and the MTO will do as the MTO desires. Was there anything further to add?
Yeah, in terms of MTO's work on the ramps, it is that was done part of their rehabilitation EA that they had done back in 2011, I'm thinking. And that identified the changes for the ramps, whether they were being closed or relocated or reconfigured. In terms of their progress towards those EA requirements, in terms of rehabilitation, they are working towards currently the bridge replacements, as you see in Simcoe, and then it would be in Pickering and all whatnot. So they are working on the bridges currently, but there's no timeline as to the full widening requirements or the ramp changes. So the province doesn't have any funding or commitments towards those, so there's no timelines as to say when they will get to them.
At the back left, sir?
I have a couple questions. Is there any discussion of putting a lid on 401? Because you're going to start putting a bunch of people in bigger buildings, so any sound that would normally escape into the sky will hit the buildings and then ricochet downward. It's one thing I really hate about fireworks in Toronto. We moved to the lake. They are so unbelievably loud. So is there any discussion of trying to silence some of that area? It's between two train tracks and one.
I'm not aware of any. I don't know, Ranjit, if you've heard. I mean, that's a pretty big idea.
I would just say that like noise, like, because you're talking about rail, MTO would have looked at noise through their EA that Ranjit had mentioned. And then also I know that noise and noise mitigation is something that Metrolinx has to look at through their EA and through their recently completed EA addendum. So they had done an EA in 2011. They just completed an addendum to that EA November of last year. And I know that noise was something that was mentioned in both. So they're certainly provincially and legislatively required to be considerate of the school property with respect to noise.
And the next thing is, like, we have these predefined blocks made up by the roads. As more places get built and the city ultimately then takes out the last couple of remaining people with appropriation, you know what's going to happen. Is there any discussion about eliminating certain roads to allow higher density in certain areas? Because like if all the houses are, it's theoretically going to be gone. Do we need a specific road for 2 or 3 condo towers? Or could we pick up the road and then put in better areas?
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, if say a block had 3 houses on it and those 3 houses are assembled and a development application comes in and there's a road spur that only services those 3 roads, certainly it's not something that would necessarily be off the table to say, okay, well, maybe we, this becomes a private laneway and the development is served by that laneway. That's a hypothetical. It's not something that we're have in front of us right now. I know Paul mentioned off the hop that, this is kind of a visioning exercise. It's meant to kind of set a plan for an area. And as we get development applications, they're looked at case by case. And, certainly if that hypothetical situation comes in through a development application, I don't think it would be something that'd be off the table, but it would have to be looked at case by case.
Yeah. And then just to add, like, our intent here is not to limit mobility, is to actually increase mobility in this area. We would very, very scrutinize any options to remove mobility in the hopes to get more density. And as you can see, like the purple, the Lawville Farms property and the development, there's actually improvements to mobility by providing connections to east, west, and north, south. We want those because we don't want all the traffic funneling into one area or one road. That's just counterintuitive of what we want.
Well, I'm like just thinking about like the properties that are closest to the rail line. Like there's road that just goes through.
Yeah,
and stuff.
Yeah, one-offs, like those are things that we would probably definitely consider for the higher purpose. But overall, I think our aim is to provide better mobility in general.
And this last question, it's sort of more directed towards the counselor, but I'll direct it at everybody. Do we know that they're going to actually build that parkland, or are they going to try to bribe the city again to be like, hey, what if we give you an extra $100,000 and we don't have to build? They
legally have to do it.
Don't like the word bribe.
What was the property in North Oshawa where they were like, hey, we'll give you extra money and you don't have to build the parkland? Like that came to council a year or 2 ago.
So under the Planning Act, when you get a development application, the city has, to put it at a high level, multiple options. We are able to take land on site in order to build parkland, or we can take money, but legislatively that money has to be specifically used elsewhere in the city for parkland. So it's kind of a matter of kind of land here or land there. That's kind of a conversation that happens under the review of every development application of a certain size.
And I'm just concerned because there's not a lot of parkland
Yeah.
here.
I can, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I tried before to not have to build parkland with the, oh, you can build it somewhere else. Is that going to happen here? And then everywhere else, the city gets more parkland for people who are going to live here.
No, I think it would be quite fair to say that the issue of parkland in this area is very much on the city's radar. In fact, just last year, we acquired through expropriation an addition to Elena Park. So that area is seen green. That's just, it used to be the old schoolyard for the school that's now, it fronts on the Simcoe, it's 505 Simcoe. But that school, which is now a seniors residence at the northwest corner of Simcoe and First Avenue, that schoolyard now has been bought by the city. Doesn't look like it's owned yet because the old chain link fence is still around it, but that is going to be used to enlarge Elena Park by another, 2/3 of its current size. So the city is already starting to take steps to acquire parkland, and certainly through this process, we're identifying kind of key target opportunity areas where as development occurs, like the big redevelopment of the Pittsburgh Plate and Glass site, to have actual physical parkland, as was discussed earlier in that southeast corner of the site. So yes, it's very much on our radar, and we certainly do identify a need for actual physical parkland in this study area.
Is your hand at the back up, or no, you're just right? Okay, no, sorry. Let's go here. Somebody who hasn't asked a question first, and then we'll
Can
go.
you give us your specifics to the metrics of, the area on parkland? So you need to have so many acres, hectares, whatever. Those are a bunch of stars, but how much parkland is minimum in that space?
So I believe actually it was subject of a previous PIC. We did actually have a slide that did outline exactly how much was there currently and exactly how much would be needed per our official plan, given however many people moving to the area or however many people and jobs in the area. I don't think we have it in this presentation, just because it was a metric of existing conditions, which was kind of subject to the previous PIC. But certainly, if you want to take my contact down, I can get you that slide deck, and certainly I can highlight that number.
So I can.
Yes, oh, absolutely. Yeah, all the previous presentations are online as well.
Can I switch to continue to First Avenue McNaughton? And can we go to one of the slides where the bike things are there, or one of the pictures where you're looking at the roadway?
The cross section?
Yeah. You can show that. I'll speak to that.
Yeah.
Having cycled in Europe, option number one, I think exists in Oshawa today. That's not my choice as a cyclist. Option number two would be, I've cycled in Belgium. They have the designated lanes with, now that I see the picture, number two, some shrubbery there that doesn't have to be, the city doesn't have to go with a lawnmower, that kind of thing. If you go to the site, to the slide where you have the actual city street picture, any one of them.
What are you talking about?
Existing.
Yeah.
Existing,
Yeah.
one before this?
Yeah.
So you have a picture on the left, yeah, like that. Are we going to get rid of the overhead wires on the street? Bury them?
That is one of those considerations that we would have to fine tune as part of our detailed design for preliminary design that we have to do the next stage. So the ones we show right now are concept. You probably see the roll plans to see how it would look like on the aerials.
So is this concept, does it have overhead wires? I can't see that clear.
Well, currently it does.
We still need streetlights.
Utilities, servicing, all that needs to be figured out as part of the next stage, which is looking at the details of the design.
Okay. What else? Oh, I was also mentioning about, you have traffic lights.
Yep.
Consider you have the space for roundabouts where you don't need the traffic lights. So if you do that, then you have to consider how that impacts those bicycle lanes. So if you have option number two on the bike lanes, I don't think the roundabout hurts it. But if you have all like your, what's it, option two on
The two-way cycle track.
if you have like this alternate, then that could be a different consideration. So, sorry, your name is again?
Paul.
Oh, I was asking Paul if he knew whether the current space for the street could incorporate a roundabout at a given intersection. So you have a stoplight going from Ritson west. I don't think you have two stoplights. I think you just have.
And I think that's a great question, and I think that's one of the considerations that we would have to confirm in terms of the traffic operations of that intersection, whether it's going to be signal, roundabout, stop control. And biggest concern is the space required for a roundabout. And considering this is not a greenfield and it's pre-built, and we're working with a 26-meter right-of-way And hopefully, if needed, we go to 30. But a roundabout, I know for a fact that it's gonna need much more. So the space requirements may be one of those factors that we have to consider before we actually.
So if you were able to put a roundabout and you're dealing with, this is my thinking, and you're dealing with width of street, you don't have to be from Ritson to Simcoe, you don't have to be straight. You can be off because the curve of the roundabout puts you into the lane.
But definitely, I think that's part of the next design phase is to look at the details of how things can be accommodated into the design.
You have there the double option 3, where you're on the south side. Where are most of the people going to be living? On the north side or on the south side? And then think of where the GO train is.
Yeah.
In other words, if that's on the south side, there's a purpose for it.
Yeah.
If it's on the north side, there's a purpose for that.
And again, these are all just options we're presenting and exploring. And this is where we need the input to say, okay, what's better in your opinion and what you should consider.
But because as the group here, you know where the planning,
Yes.
where most people are going
Yeah.
to be.
We know what the preference or what our preference is, but we also want to listen to what the public has to say.
But from us, it's like I'm looking and it's on the south side.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a purpose to the south side or could be flipped around to the north side?
We can look, we can look. I'm not sure, Ranjit, if you are, why the south side was chosen initially, but
I'm not saying there's a
north side, yeah,
better
there's
side.
pros and cons.
I think the reasoning why it was shown on the south side was primarily because the larger parcels or developments are on the southern side and that it could be easily accommodated. But it doesn't mean that that's the final choice.
I did attend session meeting number 2, and one of the points that I noticed was the access north-south through, you can't go through the railway tracks, you got to go over them or under them, either on foot, car, or bike. So I didn't see that there was.
So that's the two questions we have is like Albert is the existing Burton Bridge that crossed the CP tracks. There's Simcoe and Ritson. Those are the 3 options. And the 4th one is the Michael Starr Trail. Through Metrolinx, the Michael Starr Trail will be retained in terms of either it's going to be, initially they had said tunnels to connecting to the station, but now they switched tracks and gone to a bridge. So it is highly dependent on their design.
Why not on your design?
We could request and we could think, but at the end of the day, they are the ones that are delivering that corridor.
However, we're the ones that are living here.
Yes.
And the big picture is not the GO station. Big picture is all the developers around that lane.
Correct.
So
that's why Metrolinx.
you say what you want and insist on it, whatever that is, not have Metrolinx say, okay, we're going to give you a bridge that you'll have to cross in the winter, if that's the case.
And it's also dependent on the development that's going to happen at the station. Metrolinx has gone away from delivering stations and now pushing it on to developers to work with them to deliver the station itself.
Okay, that sounds to me, sitting here, that you can decide what it's going to be.
Yes, eventually when that design for the station happens, and I think we can definitely influence those decisions.
For me, I think we were up to 5 or 6 questions there. I know we have people waiting, so I can't remember whether it was you or the person behind you first, if you want to.
I'm going to piggyback off the guy. Really wish Metrolinx was here. When I did live in Toronto, the Up Express did cause a lot of noise, and it was up to my condo board, and we contacted our city council to council at Bay to really, push to get barriers made and to get the city and Metrolinx to get back together, because there was so much noise caused from that. So, Metrolinx is not going to have anything like we have right here. They're going to have to contact their councilor. They're going to have to do the work to get those barriers in. I'd like to see that on west of Simcoe as well.
I'll add to that a little bit, just because we recently, and it might have been, it was definitely community led on the east side of Toronto where the Ontario line is running through the Broadview community. I think that the BIA pushed Metrolinx, and they actually had a design competition to actually look at noise mitigation and view mitigation along the corridor and how it could advance it. So you might need, it is recent, yeah.
The extension that they're making all the way from Union Station to Danforth Station. They are.
Yeah, because they're having to really swell the tracks there, carrying both TTC and.
Barriers there too.
That's right.
Noise, people falling, trespassers, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then it forced the Metrolinx to actually do even underpass improvements, like things that they wouldn't maybe do, to make the place more hospitable. Even but you have to. I agree. You might have to push them, and so I think that everyone should listen to this gentleman here to say, like, you might need to poke them a bit, but like they have in the past done it, and yeah, it's really worth it.
Sure.
Again, about the noise, I had heard a while back that there was talk of having the GO trains electrified out this way. Is that something that you have heard as well? Or?
Yes, so Metrolinx's plan is to electrify up to Oshawa Station or the Durham College Oshawa Station. But the Bowmanville expansion or extension is not initially being electrified. It's starting off as, I think, diesel, and then planning or designing for eventual electrification.
Yeah, because I mean, they got the regular CP rail going through there.
Yes.
Yes. But I know that was a talk that they.
The freight railways really do not like high voltage overhead electrification. They have control of that corridor, so.
But in Europe.
They do it all over the world.
CP in Europe.
But to add a little bit, yes, so like the bridge structures, for example, they will be built having sufficient height so the wires, the pantographs that you see on top of the cars can fit.
Why the Albert Street Bridge is not big.
Yes.
Are there any other questions in the room or online? Got a few people that stuck around online. Thank you once again for attending. I think we've had a very civil and pleasant, respectful conversation, and I think we really respect that, because I listened to the recording of the last PIC before this, and thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
I just want to introduce myself. Thank you very much. Thank you. Very pleasant accents. Nice to meet you. So I'm sure we'll be dealing. Yeah, the face to a name. Yes. Right. Yeah. One thing. That's what it's. Don't ever get like 4 years. Don't. That's when the public. I wants to show the remaining. I wouldn't even say that. That's what's happening at the Scarborough. So never put a date here. Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. I will always have a question. I'd say it's outside of here. Oh, I know. Even if you're going to hear that, say, oh, I haven't even seen that. Just to give you an Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Go for it.